Hi everyone, this is Dr. Bridges, and I'm here to talk about the RES811 Module 7 Enhanced Synthesis paper. First, a few reminders. For all formal assignments in the course, I put a resource folder for the assignment on the Questions to Instructor forum. Please be sure that you use the template that I've made for you and placed out on the QTI resource folder. If you have any questions about the assignment, if you could ask them also in that resource folder, then I can answer the question for the benefit of all students. I can only accept Word documents, so please no PDFs or text files. When you go to submit your work in the Dropbox, you will notice that there's two buttons. There's a citation report submission and then also a final submission button. You can submit your assignment to turn it in using the citation report button. You may do this multiple times to ensure you have no plagiarized material. However, do not click on the final submission button until you are ready for me to grade your work. Once you use the final submission button, you will not be able to edit your document or submit another document for grading. So be sure, as I said, you can submit as many times as you'd like to turn it in. Just be sure you're absolutely, completely done with the assignment prior to using the final submission button. Be sure to turn your work in, turn it in. It takes about 15 minutes usually, but as a due date comes nearer and nearer, what happens is that more users are on the server and it could take up to an hour to return your Turnitin report. So be sure to budget plenty of time. Don't simply submit your work to turn it in. I want you to submit it to turn it in, review the report to see if you have any unintentional plagiarism or unsuccessful paraphrasing or over-reliance on direct quotes. Now we're going to be talking about the Module 7 Enhanced Synthesis paper. I can't accept a paper with more than a 15% Turnitin similarity, and that's with the exclude quotes filter turned off. To turn off the exclude quotes filter, look at the diagram here, click on the filter button, unclick exclude quotes, and then click apply changes. One way to make sure that you don't have a high Turnitin percentage is first, don't use direct quotes in your paper. At the doctoral level, in a paper of this length, I would not expect to see any more than one direct quote, and it should be a short one, and it would also need to be very, very important quotation that you couldn't possibly paraphrase in your own words. So limit the amount of direct quotes that you do. Secondly, be sure that you don't have any plagiarism. You could certainly have a 0% on your Turnitin similarity and still plagiarize. For instance, if you use no citations in your paper, but you talked about the work in these articles, then you've plagiarized. So that's one way that you could have a 0% Turnitin similarity and still have plagiarism. So always check your report. Your work can't contain any plagiarism or over-reliance on direct quotations. And at this point in the class, I think that you should be used to working with Turnitin. Looking at Bloom's taxonomy, we're going to be at the highest level for this assignment, which we would have been using synthesis for the Module 3, 5, and 7 assignments. And we're combining parts to make a new whole. And in this case, we're using these articles to create our own discussion of doctoral identity. So, the Module 7 Enhanced Synthesis paper is not a new paper. You're not starting from scratch. You're going to start with your Module 5 Synthesis paper on doctoral identity. You're going to review my feedback and update your paper according to the feedback that I provided you. That's going to be about 10% of your grade. You're going to improve the discussion basically by looking at the feedback that I've pointed out where you need to improve. Secondly, you're going to supplement your argument with at least 2 articles from the list provided in the course materials. You're going to try and improve at least 2 different themes. You're also going to provide a reflection, and that's going to be about 250 to 300 words on the feedback and review process. Reflect on the feedback and revision process, and I want you to discuss specifically how you use the new supplemental articles to strengthen your themes from the Module 5 paper. And going forward, how will you use the reflection process to improve your own doctoral identity? I don't mind if you write in first person for the reflection, but in the body of the paper, you should adhere to academic standards and write in third person. Now, the entire course has revolved around a critical understanding of 3 articles on the topic of doctoral identity, and those are Baker and Pifer, Gardner, and Smith and Hatmaker. Topic 7, we're going to actually ask learners to improve on that initial draft of the synthesis paper through revisions to the original document and to strengthen the narrative with the use of outside sources. So first, in the introduction, I want to see you explain what doctoral identity is, why it's important, and how these 3 aspects contribute to developing a doctoral identity. I want you not to introduce the articles in the introduction. I want you to stay away from introducing any of the articles. And that's because as we look forward to your dissertation process, you're not going to be introducing 50 or 60 articles before you start making your argument. Even in these articles that you're reading, Baker and Pifer, Gardner and Smith and Hatmaker, if you look at their introductions, they don't introduce the articles that they're going to use to discuss before they start with their argument. Essentially, you want to think about these articles as the knowledge base that we've given you that you're using to pull evidence to support your discussion of doctoral identity. In the introduction, I want to see you conclude with a strong thesis statement that's defensible. You don't need to list the 3 themes in your thesis. That's one way to create a thesis statement. It's not the only way. In your themes, you should have academic success, relationships, and the 3rd theme that you chose. First, I don't care in what order you present those themes. Do so in what order makes sense, the best defense of your thesis statement. In your statement of common themes that you'll have in your introduction, if you took these 3 things, you said academic success and relationships and whatever your 3rd theme is, and you talk about how they are important aspects to contributing to doctoral identity, whichever order that you present them in the introduction, you should present your themes in that order in the paper. Now, in each theme, I want to see a clear connection between the theme and how it contributes to developing a doctoral identity. We're not simply talking about relationships that doctoral students have, we're talking about relationships that doctoral students have and how that contributes to forming a doctoral identity. How is academic success or the changing ideas about academic success important to forming a doctoral identity? Your 3rd theme should be an important key aspect of developing a doctoral identity. At this point, you should have received information that your 3rd theme cannot be doctoral identity. It can't be developing doctoral identity or developing identity or professional identity or anything to do with identity, because that's the topic of your paper. So doctoral identity has 3 key aspects: understanding the changing ideas of academic success, relationships, and what's something else that's important in all of these articles that helps students develop their doctoral identity. In your conclusion, I would like to see a statement of conclusion that reflects but not restates your thesis. And this is one great way of checking the alignment. Does the beginning of your paper match the ending of your paper? And secondly, summarize the 3 key points from your themes. If you have, from your discussion, come up with ideas for what future research should be in this field, and you can substantiate that based on your discussion, then you can also add any ideas that you have for future research. What I don't want to see is a whole bunch of new discussion come up in your conclusion. Any important information about these themes should be included in the discussion portion of your paper and not in the conclusion. So I have just some tips for success and for improved synthesis. First, I want you to cite consistently throughout the paper. Anytime you're referring to someone else's ideas, you need a citation, even if you're not directly quoting. I want you to move away from describing the articles. For instance, think about not using the phrase "these articles." You shouldn't be talking about the articles as a group. write this as if it's a journal article and that your readers may not have read these articles. So give them the context they need to understand the argument that you're having, but you don't need to focus on describing what these particular articles are about. You're simply using them to support your particular claims. Avoid author says statements. So Baker and Pifer posit, Baker and Pifer suggest. Gardner showed that anything like that is an author says statement. It's stronger if you use a parenthetical citation. And for examples of how to do this, please refer to the articles that you're reading. Notice that all of their work has been based on evidence from other people's work. So they're using other people's work to build their discussion and to build their reasons for having completed this particular research study. So make sure that you start noticing those things and you can emulate that writing style. That doesn't mean you never use just a regular according to so-and-so, but you should really try to limit them. I want you to keep your focus on your discussion of the topic, provide evidence for that argument, but again, move away from simply describing to me what you read. One analogy that I use that is sometimes helpful for students is, imagine that I've asked you to bake a cake, and these articles are flour, sugar, butter, etc. If you find that you're telling me what flour is as opposed to combining the flour with the sugar to make the batter, then you're focusing on description and not on synthesis. So be sure to check your alignment. Check that each of your themes supports your thesis statement. Check that your conclusion reflects your thesis statement. Your thesis statement is the driving force in your paper. One way of getting a better argument, better constructed argument, and improving the flow of ideas in your paper is to have a really strong thesis. I provided all kinds of resources in the classroom. I'll post some more in the classroom, but you should have received some in your feedback as well. Some general academic tips. You're going to be writing in third person. Now, the only exception is I don't mind if you write in first person for the reflection portion of this, but no I, we, us, our, you, our, or your in your paper. Finally, avoid rhetorical questions, sweeping generalizations, and famous quotations in your paper. Thank you so much for your time. I look forward to reading your revised paper.